So it is awesome to be with this group. Thank you for joining us. We are excited about the of Agility Prime going forward. So my name's Clint Hinote. Everybody calls me Q. That's my call sign. And the reason why I have that call sign is it's a takeoff on the James Bond character. So I love talking technology, and I'm very honored that my job in the Air Force right now is to lead the team that thinks about the future of our force. So I get to work with great people like Scott and Nate and Brendan, and we get to sit around and do all sorts of stuff to think about the future. So sometimes we play war games. Sometimes we do modeling and simulation. Sometimes we just write stories about what the future might be like. And in fact, one of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit later is a story that I have personally written about what the Agility Prime can do to help us as we go forward. So what I'm going to try to do for just a short time this afternoon, because I know everybody wants to go to the different rooms and interact, and we want you to go do that. But I want to just talk a little bit about what we might use this for. You know, I mean, we absolutely care about the health of industry. We want to reignite an aerospace sector that's so important to us. And you heard Dr. Roper talk about that before. We also want to win wars if we have to go fight them. We got to do all the things that we need to be able to do. And so I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about how we might use this technology going forward. So I'm going to do that. So as we do our war games, as we do our simulations, as we write our concepts, which are basically stories, one of the things that we have seen over and over and over is the usefulness of vertical takeoff and landing technologies. Now, I saw the chat rooms this morning. I was watching along with a bunch of you, and several people said, well, what about helicopters? And yes, we are going to keep flying helicopters. Helicopters are incredibly useful for the military. I'd say there are a couple of differences, right? Like helicopters are generally pretty expensive. They're generally pretty loud. I've flown helicopters. I wasn't qualified in them, but I've flown around in them. They're a little bit hard to fly. It takes specialized training to do that. We're looking for another a more widespread, widely applicable solution. We certainly would like a solution at a lower cost point for all the right reasons. And so when we think about the things that we might do with Agility Prime, some things come to the fore, right? So we have some folks that work a long way away from where they live right now. An example would be our missile operators up in our northern states. And we'd like to be able to get them to where they work in a fast and safe way. That's one example, and that's just a pure transportation use case. But then you start building off of that. So one of the things that we must be able to do, even while fighting, is being able to resupply our forces that are out in the field, being able to take parts to them if they need to fix something, being able to get things away from the front lines. And so we see a lot of use cases that have to do with the transport of small packages and or small, groups of people. And so logistics and sustainment becomes a use case that we're incredibly interested in. And this is especially true. You heard our secretary talk a little bit this morning about how our competitors have created environments that make it very difficult for us to operate in. So one of the things that we share, and we're actually actively working with the Marine Corps right now on things like how do we get the logistics that we need? How do we deliver those small packages and small groups of people to the right spots in that combat zone? And certainly we see use cases for VTOL in that. Think about a disaster, right? If you have a hurricane or something that comes through, one of the first things that a disaster commander, one of the commander of the local force is going to want to do is to see what the damage is and what needs to be done and assess the situation. Not that long ago, the Bahamas was hit with a pretty bad hurricane. They needed to assess the situation. This would be the ideal type of technology to do that. especially if you could do more than one, if you had the ability to bring a bunch of them around and be able to do that assessment very quickly. And closely related to that is that we see that the idea of rescuing people, so either in peacetime or even in wartime, we see that this technology could be really good in doing the rescue mission. In fact, I wrote a story had to do with reimagining my chief of staff's. So those of you who don't know General Goldfein, he'll be on later on this week. He was shot down during Allied force. That was a engagement that we had in Eastern Europe, and his F-16 was shot out of the sky. He parachuted down. He was rescued shortly thereafter by a pretty large rescue operation that used helicopters to go get him out. In today's world, it would be very hard to get those helicopters in and out because of the defensive technologies that our potential adversaries have. So we reimagined his shoot down in today's world with today's technologies. And one of the technologies that played really well inside of that story was Agility Prime. And so if you get a chance, ask him about that at the end of the week and how we might use this technology to do something different in his story there. So one of our missions that we do a lot is called Aeromedical Evacuation. When somebody gets hurt, one of the most important things that we can do is get them back to medical care. So a lot of times we call the time frame the golden hour. After they get hurt, if we can get them to that primary medical care within an hour, there's a very good chance we can save them. This type of technology seems like it's tailor-made for that. And we're excited about. We heard people talk about base defense. So we oftentimes have big bases with very large perimeters, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of everything that's going on. This type of technology could help in the rapid reaction forces that we go out and check to see if somebody was trying to fight their way onto our base or to do something nefarious, maybe sneak on and things like that. This would certainly help. Closely related to that is the idea of special operations forces. So a quiet airplane that could insert special operations forces or go get them out would be very difficult for our potential enemies to see and to be able to detect and do something about. And so the idea of special operations forces really makes a lot of sense too. And you also heard this morning about this idea of being independent from runways. So unfortunately, when the enemy knows where you are in today's world, where everybody has precision weapons and they can hit what they're aiming at, you don't want everybody to know that you're on the runway because they could just shoot the runway. And so one of the things that we want to be able to do is be very unpredictable. And these type technologies make a lot of sense from that point of view. So that's just a few of the things that we see in this for the use cases going forward. You know, I wanted to talk just a second before we let you all go about what the Air Force brings to this. And I come at it from the point of view of a pilot and an officer. And here are just some thoughts. You know, as I was coming up, I was inculcated in a safety culture. I'm proud of the Air Force. You know, there was a time in our history where we measured life expectancy of a pilot in weeks. And of course, now it's rare to have an aircraft accident. I commanded a base in Korea, and for the entire year, we didn't have any Class A or Class B accidents. Those are the serious accidents that we all try to avoid. And that was all due to the team and to our safety culture. And, you know, interestingly, we promote one of the things that helps an officer get promoted is to be in that safety culture and mindsets. As an example, I'm a certified accident board president. And if needed, I could go lead a board that would investigate a mishap. And so that's just an example of the culture that we bring to this type of effort. You heard Dr. Roper and others talk about certification. I totally agree with that. there's no better place in the world to think through all of the different issues, using the Air Force and our other joint partners as your partners going forward. I also think that there's this idea of training, and that we have deep experience in trying to determine how much training it takes to be able to operate an aircraft effectively. And we see a time, and we're experimenting now within the force, we see a time when automation technologies make the requirements on the pilot much less. And we see flying as being accessible to a much wider range of people. And so I think that that's an important thing to know too going forward. So we're really excited about this idea of partnerships, about recreating the aerospace nation partnerships that helped make the United States the leader in space for so many years. You know, one of our founders, one of the people that we think of as the initial energy sources behind an independent Air Force, was a guy named Billy Mitchell. And he used to talk about how important it was that you didn't think about air power as just military, that it was all of it put together. It was the commercial airlines, it was the civilian sector, it was the universities doing the research, it was mavericks out there, thrill seekers, all of these things coming together to make an aerospace nation. And that was the source of strength, not that different from the maritime nations that established the world empires in previous centuries. And so we want to see that happen again. I totally agree with Dr. Roper that we missed the drone revolution. It really bothers me. In fact, I think we saw it, and I just think we couldn't get the bureaucracy out of the way. And that's why we're so excited about having someone in our leadership like Dr. Roper, who can help us tell these stories and be able to change the rules so that we can do what we're doing today. And I think it's going to be an exceptional partnership going forward. We're going to do our best to keep talking about the use cases in the military, to be able to take what we're seeing in the commercial sector and see how that translates into the value for that we need to be able to defend the American people. So I'm going to leave with a challenge for you as you get ready to go off into your groups. Here's what we would really like to know. In your opinion, what is the most difficult challenge that's facing industry regarding agility prime? And then very closely related to that, how can we in the government and in the military do things to help that? So I'm not going to give you any ideas. I have ideas on this, but we want to hear from you. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Scott and the team. But thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you just a little bit about this exciting technology and how we intend to use it. So thanks.